no sales tax, absolutely free. You read them and you judge for yourselves and find out why they have been taken out of our libraries and out of our classrooms. All right, take your pick, make your choice. There you go. Find out what goes on in the outside world, kids. Find out what goes on outside Bedford, California. All right, here we go. Come on, come on. Get your free books. No charge, absolutely no charge. Take your pick, make your choice.
Hey, you're Sam Benedict, aren't you?
That's right.
I'm from the Bedford Star. Are you here as Matthews' lawyer?
I don't know yet.
Matthews says that the big barrister from San Francisco would defend him. That true?
We can't defend Matthews until some charge has been brought against him.
Step right up, friends. Step right up and meet your enemies. They contain ideas, huh? It's a beautiful day in Bedford, California, friends. Take the book of your choice and strike a blow for freedom. Here we go. Take one, Eddie. There you go. Jim, grab it. Take your books, boys. Free, absolutely free. Don't hang back. Come on, take a book. Here. Take the book of your choice and strike a blow for freedom. There you are. Take your books there. Get a second thought on them.
What, Matthews?
It's all free. Here is a book, officer, for your personal library. I disapprove of what you say, but I will fight to the death for your right to say it. Read it.
Mr. Matthews, I order you to surrender those books.
I'm surrendering the books. Here you are, friends. This may be your last chance. Take a book here. This offer may not be repeated.
Mr. Matthews, you're under arrest.
On what charge, officer?
Violation of Municipal Code 3764. Distributing lewd and immoral literature. Come on.
Yeah, well, I haven't surrendered enough books yet. Here you are, kids. Take your books. I'm not ready yet, huh?
Go along with them peaceably, Mr. Matthews.
You must be Sam Benedict, right?
That's right. And watch out how you handle him, officer. Or you may be up to your badge in police brutality charges.
All right. Go along. Is that evidence?
You're going to represent me, Mr. Benedict.
I don't know yet. Go along now.
You can't take him away. We're not going to let you.
Now listen, Miss Barber, you get out of my way, you'll find yourself in juvenile court.
Come on, Barbara, he's right. Now just get out of the way.
I don't care. You have no right arresting him like some common thief or something.
I'm afraid he has, miss. And the policeman's right. You'll only get yourself in trouble now.
That's right, Barbara. Mr. Matthews is a lewd and perverted thinker. He deserves to be in prison.
That's not fair, Mrs. Hartley.
You see, he's already corrupted her.
How can she possibly say anything like that about Mr. Matthews?
Young lady, whatever Mr. Matthews has or hasn't done, come out in court.
But it shouldn't go to court, Mr. Benedict. That's why we're all here. The very idea of accusing Mr. Matthews of that, lewd and immoral. What is lewd about Gulliver's Travels, or immoral about Huckleberry Finn, or pornographic about Don Quixote? I am asking you, Mr. Benedict, how can they put Mr. Matthews in jail for giving away books like these?
I was 34 last month. However, a man's true age can only be measured by his depth of vision, his maturity of intellect, his ability to assess the wisdom of the ages against the problems of the present.
Well, never mind the double talk. Just give me a straight answer.
No, I doubt there is such a thing as a straight answer, Sergeant. You see, each individual interprets what he hears in the light of what his mind understands. Now, there can be as many interpretations as there are
Answer the questions, Mr. Matthews, simply and directly.
Oh, welcome to the Bastille, Mr. Benedict. I was simply trying to explain...
I know what you're trying to do. And my advice to you is to cut it out now.
It shall be as you say. Next.
Occupation.
Pedagogue. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm a high school teacher, Bedford City High.
Mr. Benedict, I'm Byron Leonard, city attorney. Miss Leonard. I must confess, I'm a little surprised to see you in Bedford City. Why is that? Well, a lawyer with your reputation involved in such a minor case in a small town like this.
I don't regard book burning as a minor incident, Mr. Leonard. And the size of the town he lives in has nothing to do with the defendant's right to adequate and proper counsel.
Well, you're right, of course. It's just that I thought of it as a local matter.
Last previous arrest of any.
Sergeant, I ask you as one gentleman to another, do I look like a case-hardened criminal?
Just answer the questions.
All right, no previous arrests.
All right, Mr. Matthews. Mugshots and fingerprints in there.
Come on.
Tell me, Mr. Matthews, now that you've been arrested, what's the next phase in your Operation Censorship?
Well, frankly, Mr. Foster, I fully intend to make my...
Don't answer that, and don't talk to anyone until I have a chance to talk to you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Foster. My master's voice.
What about the arraignment?
Judge Vesey is sitting in municipal court in 30 minutes. Will that do?
That'll be fine.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm banning the books here, aren't I right?
You certainly are.
Were any of you students involved in the publicity stunt of Mr. Matthews?
Publicity stunt. Mr. Tabor, this was a sincere effort on the part of Mr. Matthews to bring this horrid ordinance of banning books here to the attention of this city, state, and the entire world. Why, Mr. Tabor, Hitler's Germany lighted the fires of its destruction when it fanned the flames of burning books.
The point I'm trying to find out is this. Whether you or any of the other students actively participated in Mr. Matthews' plan.
No, Mr. Tabor, this was all Mr. Matthews' idea. And now he's got himself arrested and he's going to be brought to trial.
And he may go to jail.
So did Henry David Thoreau and Jonathan Swift and Tom Paine and Voltaire. I think. But believe me, Mr. Tabor, Mr. Matthews knows what he's doing.
I certainly hope so.
Hey, Barbie!
Hey, where you been, you hodad? You promised to be at the school for Mr. Matthews' demonstration.
Oh, I'm sorry, Yo-Yo, but I had more important things to do. I had to help Andy chop the block in his gangster wagon.
Oh, you pitiful cretin, you. Mr. Tabor, this is Roy.
How do you do, Mr. Tabor?
Hi, Roy.
Mr. Tabor is one of the lawyers for Mr. Matthews.
Oh. Well, I hope you can get Joan of Arc here off this kick she's been on. Boy, she's been riding her white horse in orbit. Hey, it's kickoff time. Come on.
Hey, hurry up. Come on.
All rise, please. This court is now in session. The Honorable Howard Vesey presiding.
Be seated.
People versus Claude Matthews. Mr. Clerk, arraign the defendant.
In the municipal court of the state of California, in and for the Bedford Judicial District, the city attorney hereby accuses Claude Matthews of the following misdemeanors on or about the 23rd of March this year, to wit, inciting to riot, 1 count, violating municipal ordinance 3764, distributing copies of certain books deemed lewd and immoral, and additionally, contributing to the delinquency of minors in 19 separate and distinct counts. Is your true name Claude Matthews?
Yes, it is. However, Your Honor, these charges of my contributing to delinquency of minors are ridiculous. Does anybody think I'm not aware of my responsibility to my students? The most irresponsible person I know, the one who pushed through this abhorrent ordinance, sits right there, Mrs. Wilma Hartley.
Mr. Matthews, you're not here to make this courtroom your podium. You will be given every opportunity to acquaint this court with all and any facts pertinent to your case. Now, Mr. Benedict, is the defendant ready to plead?
Your Honor, I request a continuance.
Your Honor, what is at issue here is something very fundamental, an evil law which presumes to tell you, me, all of us, what we may or may not read in the privacy of our own living rooms.
Look, if I hear one more word...
I'll make my point.
Sit down here and mind your business, will you? Now, be good.
Mr. Benedict, it is your responsibility to control your client. Please see to it that you do so. Now, is the defendant ready to plead?
Your Honor, I request a continuance of this hearing for at least 48 hours.
A continuance for purposes of entering a plea?
Yes, Your Honor. I've had no time to prepare an adequate defense. And in addition, from my brief examination of the local ordinance under which the defendant is charged, it is my opinion that the ordinance is unconstitutional. I intend to use the time to prepare and submit to this court a demurrer to the complaint.
Your Honor, this man has willfully and maliciously broken the law. He informed his students and members of the press he intended so doing. This is a matter of utmost urgency to the community.
Well, I doubt whether it's that urgent, Mr. Leonard. This matter is continued until Tuesday next, 10 a.m. Bail is set at $150.
Your Honor, I have exactly $6.38 between me and next payday. I'm a teacher. My budget doesn't allow for such luxuries as bail, Your Honor.
The court orders you remanded into custody until the time set for the continuance of these proceedings. Court is adjourned.
Yes, sir.
I'm a lawyer, Mr. Matthews, not an impresario for carnival acts. To me, a courtroom is a place for adult minds, not a flea circus.
I know that.
Then why not act accordingly? If I'd known you weren't serious about this question of censorship, the freedom and the right to read books of one's choice.
Mr. Benedict, there are two kinds of bigots. They're the ugly, brutal kind who make their own headlines, and the quiet, nice, respectable folk who can strangle you silently. That is this town. I had to wake them up. I had to expose them.
And you went about it the wrong way.
I'm sorry, I don't agree. Look, I teach English, Mr. Benedict. That includes literature and journalism. I assign certain books for classroom study. And I found out that those books had been taken out of the school library. They couldn't be bought in the bookstores. There weren't even any paperback copies available. All right, I talked to my school principal. I even went to the city attorney. I complained to him. I even humbled myself before Mrs. Hartley and her Pure Books committee, which pushed through this ordinance. And I didn't get any place. Now, what could I do except take things into my own hands, even if I do wind up in jail?
I'm not as concerned about you right now as I am about your students, Mr. Matthews. It's one thing to teach them English literature and the beauty of a free-thinking mind. It's another to teach them to flaunt the law, incite riot, and to make mockery of the very principles under which you now expect me to defend you.
Whatever I have done, whether it's right or wrong, I did solely for the benefit of those wonderful students that you're talking about. Well?
Deputy, would you get a hold of my associate, Mr. Tabor, have him arrange bail for Mr. Matthews?
Mr. Benedict,
Mrs. Hartley.
may I speak to you alone?
Mr. Tabor, would you care to join a lecherous, dirty old man and a milkshake at the local pub?
What's on your mind, Mrs. Hartley?
Well, I just wanted to say how delighted I am that a man of your reputation is representing Mr. Matthews.
Oh?
You see, the fundamental issues involved here go much further than the trial of an individual. I would like to assure you that we are not deliberately persecuting Mr. Matthews.
Just what do you believe you are doing, Mrs. Hartley?
Well, it's very simple. Surely you must be aware of the salacious girly magazines and the sex-filled garbage on our newsstands. That is there solely for the purpose of exciting and perverting the immature minds of adolescents.
Of course I am, Mrs. Hartley. But I don't agree that you or any other individual has the right to decide for others what is pornographic and what is great literature.
All I can say is that I honestly believe that every book on our list includes a passage that is there solely for the purpose of exciting sensual desire. Not to mention the filthy four-letter words in some of them.
There's a difference between words and concept, Mrs. Hartley. It seems evident to me that you're trying to convince me that men are innately weak, full of sin, and prone to error, that they must be guided, controlled, and restrained. Is that correct?
I would say so. Yes.
Well, I'm afraid I don't share those beliefs, Mrs. Hartley. Good day.
Good day.
Open. Oh, Hank. Come on in. You want a warm beer?
You seen this?
On school paper? No, why?
Read the front page editorial.
The courage of Claude Matthews' conviction to inspire us, we must insist on our right to read the books of our choice in bed. Well, that is not bad for a 17-year-old girl, is it?
What 17-year-old girl?
Oh, you know her. Barbara Eddy. She's been one of my #1 pupil. Aha! Boy, she doesn't pull any punches, does she?
She's advocated violating the same ordinance that you've already been thrown into jail for. Did you see that before it was published?
No, but
You taught journalism at the school before you were suspended. Weren't you the faculty advisor for the paper?
Yeah, of course I was, Hank, but I didn't see this before it was published. I haven't seen it until just now. Can this get her into trouble?
It could get both of you into trouble. Your obvious influence on her could be interpreted as contributing to the delinquency of a minor. And what she's doing could be interpreted as conspiracy to violate that ordinance.
I don't like trouble in my school, Barbara. I don't like it at all. Now, regardless of my personal feelings about Bedford High, I just can't condone your making a mockery of your school and your community.
But, Mr. Hewitt, if you really believe in freedom of speech and freedom of the press and the rights of the individual, you must know I wasn't making a mockery of anything.
My dear child, I've been concerned about such matters since long before you were born. In your case, however, that is not the primary issue.
But what is, Mr. Hewitt?
Barbara, you're guilty of a form of dishonesty. Now, you well know that all copy for the school paper must be approved by a faculty advisor. Yet you deliberately sneaked in this editorial without such approval.
But, Mr. Hewitt,
Barbara, what you have done is to call upon your fellow students to defy the law. I'm very sorry, Barbara, but I'm afraid you're going to have to face the consequences.
What are the consequences, sir?
Well, as of today, you are no longer editor of the school paper. And what is worse for you, I know, is that the Scholarship Foundation has withdrawn your scholarship from the university. I'm terribly sorry, Barbara.
For you.
Now look what you've done.
Well, what's the matter with you? You still sore at the world? You didn't miss anybody here, did you? PTA, city council, football team, and a couple of twins named Alfred. You might as well have used a shotgun.
I happen to feel very strongly about things like censorship and civil rights, Roy.
Censorship and civil rights? Well, you didn't even know those things existed until Mr. Matthews came into your life. What are you trying to do? Start a revolution in Bedford?
I only spoke my mind. What, did they pass some kind of ordinance against that?
You know what I think? I think you didn't write any of that baloney. I think it was your Mr. Matthews who wrote it.
Oh, you leave him out of this!
Wait a minute. Are you in love with that guy or something? Hey, Barbara, wait!
Barbara?
You want some more milk?
No. No, thank you, Mr. Matthews.
Don't you think you better start getting home?
Home?
Yes, home. It's late. Your mother's gonna be worried.
Yes, I suppose so. Mr. Matthews.
What?
Thank you
For what, Barbara?
for listening to me. For letting me beat your ears off with all my troubles. I'll never forget this talk as long as I live.
Neither will I, Barbara. Well, Miss Barbara?
Okay. Mr. Matthews?
Mr. Matthews, we're looking for Barbara Eddy. You wouldn't possibly know where... Oh, there you are. Would you mind coming along with me, miss?
Coming along where?
Down to Juvenile Division. You're charged with conspiracy in violation of Municipal Ordinance 3764.
Barbara, I've tried to understand you. Believe me, I've tried. But this... Will you please explain to me what's come over you?
Nothing's come over me, Mother. Why are you taking this little episode so tragically?
Little episode? My daughter arrested, thrown into jail like I don't know what?
I believe the charge was conspiracy, Mother. To evade municipal code something or other. Anyway, they let me go.
Yes, till the trial. And conspiracy with that terrible man, Barbara.
Mr. Matthews is not a terrible man.
Barbara, how can you defend this man when you know what he's been doing? And the trouble that he's gotten you into?
Any trouble I got into is of my own doing. And only because I feel I have a right to stick up for my own beliefs.
Your beliefs? Are you trying to tell me that you believe what this man's been saying? Are you trying to tell me that you think that it's right and proper for young girls like you to read those books?
Yes, Mother. To both questions, I do.
Barbara?
Uh-huh.
What is your relationship to Mr. Matthews?
My relationship? He's my teacher.
I mean, what is he to you? What is your relationship to him?
Are you asking me? Oh, Mother, really?
Barbara, I want an answer, and I want one right now.
All right. All right. I'll tell you. I love Claude Matthews.
But you're just a child. You can't mean that.
I love him as a man, as a human being, as a teacher.
But you're not serious.
Before I knew him, I didn't know anything. He opened my eyes, Mother, taught me what life meant, taught me what it really means to live.
Barbara!
Hi, Barbara. May I come in?
Sure, Mr. Tabor. Mother, this is Mr. Tabor. He's from Mr. Benedict's office. My mother, Mrs. Eddy.
How do you do, Mrs. Eddy?
What are you doing here?
I came at Mr. Matthews' request. He's concerned about your daughter.
He's concerned. Don't you think it's a little late for him to be concerned about my daughter after what he's done to her?
I'm not quite sure I know what you mean, Mrs. Eddy.
Aren't you? Doesn't it mean anything that Barbara was an innocent child when that man came here? Doesn't it mean anything that she's never been in any trouble of any kind? until he got her under his influence.
Mother, please.
Well, she won't be seeing him again. Nor Mr. Benedict, nor you, Mr. David.
I didn't come here to force myself on you, Mrs. Eddy. But at least, let me tell you what you're up against.
I don't need anybody to tell me anything.
For Barbara's sake, I think you should know that her case comes under the Welfare and Institutions Code.
Don't give me any of that legal talk. I'm not interested.
You should be. She's subject to its provisions regarding a minor in danger of leading an idle, dissolute, immoral, or lewd life.
Barbara, you don't know what you're saying.
Isn't that what you've just been saying, Mother?
I know what the code says, Mrs. Eddy. I also know that a minor found guilty of violating any law of the state or any ordinance of county, town, or city is subject to the jurisdiction of the juvenile authorities.
But Barbara hasn't been doing it. She's not guilty of these things.
I don't think so either, Mrs. Eddy. But she's been accused of them. She still has to prepare a defense or she could be found guilty.
Yes, sir. I'll give Mr. Tabor your message as soon as he comes in. Right. May I help you?
Yes, I'm Claude Matthews.
Oh, yes, Mr. Matthews. Mr. Benedict is expecting you.
Look, I happen to believe there's a greater peril to books today than at any other time since the invention of the printing press. Otherwise, I wouldn't have taken the case. No, I don't believe it flows from sex censorship, but from the rise of authoritarian power. Well, doesn't it seem a little curious to you that many of these books that have been suppressed in Bedford are accepted literature and even classics in other cities and states all over the country? Quote me, Fred. And you can also say I'm proud and honored to be defending Mr. Claude Matthews. Well, the only thing the court could possibly find him guilty of is honesty and being dedicated to his profession. Fine. See you at the press luncheon Wednesday.
That was a great eulogy you just gave me, Mr. Benedict.
You're a long way from being dead, Mr. Matthews.
I know, but my cause is dead. I'm going to plead guilty.
How do you like your drink, Mr. Matthews?
I think I'll take it straight.
All right, now what's this all about?
I told you. I want out. I want to plead guilty.
Well, it's not as simple as all that. You can't pull out of a criminal case at your own choosing.
Well, I know that, but I can't ask you to go to the city attorney and try to make a deal for me, can I?
You want to protect Barbara Eddy?
I can't see her life ruined. She's already lost a 4-year college scholarship. If she even walks into that courtroom, could mean the end of her scholastic career, ruin her reputation in town. I can't have all that in my conscience.
What kind of deal do you have in mind?
Well, if I take full responsibility for everything that's happened, in other words, if I plead guilty to all of the charges against me, would that kill the conspiracy charge against Barbara? And would that, in turn, wipe out her ordinance violation?
Well, the way your town's behaved so far, Mr. Matthews, who can say what can or won't happen?
I know that, but you can try, can't you? You can see the city attorney, try to make him realize what he's doing to that child, tell him my deal.
It isn't that simple.
Why not?
Well, there's the question of my duty to you as a client. I can't help Barbara at your expense.
Not even if I want you to? Not even if I so instruct you?
You're not thinking this thing through.
Well, if you refuse, I can retain another attorney, can't I?
Now, let's not get emotional. If you plead guilty, you face specific penalties. More than that, you'll lose your license to teach. You told me teaching gives your life its entire meaning and purpose. What will you do if you can't teach?
I'll face that when the time comes.
All right, so you plead guilty. What happens to the gesture you made outside your high school? You took a stand for a basic freedom. Now, in effect, that freedom means nothing to you?
Of course it does, but I can't jeopardize Barbara Eddy.
Tell me more about Barbara Eddy.
Well, she's not just a nice high school girl who's all enthused about some vague ideal of some kind. Barbara has the greatest desire to encompass all of life of any student I've ever known.
Is that all you admire about her, Mr. Matthews?
What kind of an implication are you making?
The kind the city attorney will make. I have to know everything, Mr. Matthews. Everything about your relationship with that girl. Everything.
In other words, do I love the girl? Yeah. I love her. In what way do I love her? What manner do I love her? As a father, as a teacher, as a brother, as a lover? I don't know. But I do know this. As far as Barbara knows, it has been purely as a student and a teacher. Always. Now, will you go in there for me and try to make that deal?
I don't want to. But I'll do what I can.
Thank you.
Am I to understand, Mr. Benedict, that your client, Mr. Claude Matthews, is considering a guilty plea?
He's considering the welfare of one of his students.
Quite a change. Up to now, I thought that this disciple of free thought was concerned only with the sincerity of his belief, and possibly a little free publicity.
Oh, come off it, Mr. Leonard. What Claude Matthews was trying to do is an act of pure sincerity. And what he's doing now is to save a 17-year-old girl from unnecessary harassment and preserve for her a 4-year college scholarship that she rightfully deserves.
So what it all boils down to, Mr. Benedict, is that Claude Matthews will plead guilty if I persuade the juvenile authorities to drop the charges against Miss Eddy.
As much as I've advised him against it, that is exactly it.
Mr. Benedict, I've been elected to this office to uphold the law. In all conscience, I can do no less. There'll be no deal. Your client can plead guilty or not as he wishes, but we're going to trial.
And as my partner and I arrived at the school, a crowd of students was milling around. The defendant was using inflammatory language and urging his books on them.
And what did you do, Sergeant Richards?
I arrested Mr. Matthews before anybody got hurt. Looked to me like they were going to riot any minute.
Your witness, Mr. Benedict.
Sergeant Richards, you charged Mr. Matthews with inciting a riot. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Why?
As I told Mr. Leonard, things were getting out of hand. In my opinion, the crowd was about to riot.
You also said this crowd was composed of high school students. Did you notice if any of these girls and boys used force?
No, sir.
Were they armed in any way?
No, sir.
Did anyone at any time lay a hand either on you or any of your fellow officers?
No, sir.
You said you knew the books you confiscated were of an immoral nature. How many of them have you read?
Well, I don't think that's necessary to...
Well, come on, Sergeant. Have you or haven't you read any of these alleged immoral books?
No, sir.
What's that mean?
Means I haven't read none of them.
You mean you knew nothing of their contents at first hand? And yet you still arrested Mr. Matthews?
That's right.
Why?
There's a list. I've heard about them.
Your list?
No.
Then who did make up the list?
The Pure Books League.
I see. Tell me, Sergeant, is the Pure Books League an official legislative body in Bedford City?
No, sir.
Well, does this Pure Books League have any official capacity?
I guess not.
Do you guess or do you know?
No, they have none.
And as I understand it, you arrested Mr. Matthews on the basis of a list of books compiled by an unofficial organization, an organization that took it upon themselves to separate the pure from the impure. And on that basis alone, you decided that these books are of a lewd and immoral nature.
Yes, sir.
Just one more question, Sergeant. Do you know who the unofficial head of this unofficial organization is?
Yes. Mrs. Wilma Hartley.
And why had you made it a point to be present that day, Mrs. Hartley?
Well, I have a nephew at Bedford High School. He was present the day that Mr. Matthews said that he would deliberately violate the law. Well, I thought as a member of the city council, it was my duty to be there and see if he would carry out that threat.
So you observed everything that happened on the school grounds that day?
Oh, yes, yes. Yes, I saw the situation get out of hand. I saw Mr. Matthews resist arrest. He went quietly only after his attorney, Mr. Benedict, made him do it.
Now, as a responsible member of our city council and as president of the Pure Books League, how do salacious books such as these affect immature minds?
Well, I believe, I know that such trash leads to great harm. It is the primary cause of juvenile delinquency. It leads to widespread immorality. These books are written to glorify all that is base and vile, to stimulate impure and lustful thoughts. They ought to be exterminated. They ought to be wiped out.
Thank you, Mrs. Hartley. Your witness, Mr. Benedict.
Your Honor, I would like to reserve the right to recall this witness at the time we present the defendant's case.
Very well, Mr. Benedict. Any further witnesses, Mr. Leonard?
No, Your Honor. The people rest.
So that was my concept of getting an education, Mr. Tabor.
Would you explain what you mean more fully, Miss Eddie?
Well, I mean, until this year, my idea of going to school was being a pom-pom girl and going to the games and the dances and just having a ball in general. Of course, I got mostly C's, sometimes B, and I just floated through school.
And this year you say you made straight A's. How do you account for that?
Well, I just hadn't known learning could be fun.
And how'd you learn that?
Mr. Matthews made it fun. For all of us. Not easy. Not that. But a challenge. Something exciting, like doing your first high dive or blasting off. Only it was your mind that went into orbit. My world used to be Bedford, California. Now it's the whole universe. Big and wonderful and jumping.
And would you say this is true of most of the students in Mr. Matthews' classes?
Oh, yes, yes.
Your Honor, I move to strike.
Sustained. Strike out everything after Miss Eddie's remark about how the universe became so big and wonderful and jumping for her.
And was this change in you responsible for your becoming the editor of your school paper?
I was the editor until I published that editorial.
You're referring to the editorial published in the school paper on the 24th of March this year?
Yes.
Mr. Leonard has offered this editorial in evidence in an attempt to prove that Mr. Matthews actively attempted to get his students to enter with him into a conspiracy. Miss Eddie, will you tell us, did Mr. Matthews have anything to do with the writing of that editorial?
No, he did not.
Did you consult with him at any time? Ask his advice? Discuss any of the ideas or concepts that you wrote into that editorial?
No, sir.
In other words, that editorial is solely yours, and yours alone.
Yes.
And Mr. Matthews had nothing to do with it.
In only one way, Mr. Tabor. Mr. Matthews taught me to have faith in my own ability and my own intelligence.
Now, Mr. Matthews, we've learned about the glowing character references and scholastic credentials and achievements, which led to you being hired as a teacher in Bedford. Why did you risk your promising career by violating the city ordinance at issue?
Simply because I am unalterably opposed to censorship, to the abridgment of free speech or free thought anywhere.
And in your opinion, did such a situation exist here in Bedford?
It did. It still does, Mr. Benedict. Everybody knows there's open intimidation of librarians and book dealers who try to sell certain books here.
Your Honor, I move to strike both question and answer.
Yes, Mr. Leonard. Please strike everything after Mr. Matthews' statement about free speech. Mr. Benedict, would you care to rephrase the question?
No, Your Honor. You have stated your honest opinion regarding free expression, Mr. Matthews, but because of your deliberate action in behalf of that belief, you now find yourself on trial, accused not only of breaking a municipal law, but also of contributing to the delinquency of minors. In your opinion, are those charges essentially true?
No, sir, of course not.
And why do you say that?
Because I was simply being true to myself and to my students. Both as a teacher and as a person, I was being as honest as I know how.
Would you mind explaining that more fully, Mr. Matthews?
Well, a teacher is tied to his students by love and by trust, the same way parents and children are. Every small child has to trust his elders, his parents, his mother, his father, and older brother, to protect him, to guide his first steps. In the same way, in every school, the students have to trust their teachers, to be honest with them, not to distort the truth, to open up the world of reality and imagination. In my opinion, those books now banned here in Bedford do just that. If I thought that I had betrayed my students' trust in any way, I couldn't teach again.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Your witness. Your Honor, in view of the fact that Mr. Matthews has offered nothing in the way of testimony except for high-flown pseudo-intellectual hogwash, the people have no need to offer him any additional time on his soapbox. No questions. Mrs. Hartley, in addition to your other involvements, aren't you also related to the city attorney, Byron Leonard?
Yes, Mr. Leonard is my brother, yes.
And as city attorney, he decides what books are unacceptable?
Well, yes.
With the assistance of your Pure Books League?
We make recommendations as a public service.
I see that among the authors represented are such men as Hemingway, Faulkner, 2 Nobel Prize winners, Voltaire, Mark Twain, Don Quixote, Arabian Nights. Do you mean, Mrs. Hartley, that as a public service, your league persuaded the city library and various stores to remove these books from circulation?
Yes. Yes, we did. I'm proud to say.
You've read them, of course.
Oh, certainly I've read them.
All right. Let's examine one of them.
Anyone you like, Mr. Benedict.
No, anyone you'd like, Mrs. Hartley.
All right. What about Ulysses?
By James Joyce?
Mm-hmm. That's on our list.
Let the record show that it was not distributed by Mr. Matthews. But you've read it, Mrs. Hartley, in its entirety?
Oh, yes, I read it. I found it filthy and obscene.
Oh? What makes you say that, Mrs. Hartley? Surely not the scene in the tower with Buck Mulligan. You remember that, don't you? No? Well, how about the cemetery chapter, Stephen's famous discourse on the meaning of Hamlet?
I'm afraid I don't recall any of that.
Very well. How about Molly Bloom's monologue?
Yes. That I do remember. Page 723.
723?
Yes, that's where it begins.
Can you describe to this court the content and the tone of that particular section?
Describe it? Oh, no, I couldn't. It's too disgusting.
By disgusting, do you mean vicious, coarse, erotic, depraved, licentious?
Yes, I mean all of those things.
Mrs. Hartley, the scene with Buck Mulligan begins on page 1. Eminent critics consider it unforgettable, but you don't remember it. Yet the section you call disgusting is so familiar to you that you know exactly where it begins, page 723. How can you possibly explain that?
Well, The entire book is so disgusting.
The federal courts don't think so. They have declared Ulysses not obscene.
Look, I don't care. I don't care what they've declared not obscene. These books are dirty, they're lewd. They ought not to be read. They are obscene.
By obscene, do you mean that they stimulate the reader to lewd and immoral acts?
Yes.
Then they stimulated you to lewd and immoral acts, Mrs. Hartley. Is that right?
No.
But you read the book. You gave us your definition of obscenity. You have declared the book to be obscene. Therefore, it must have stimulated you.
No, it did not.
Then you have no basis for judgment, Mrs. Hartley. Ulysses doesn't belong on your list, nor do any of these books belong on that list.
They do. They do. They're dirty, they're lewd, they're wicked, they're vulgar.
Your Honor, I object.
No further questions.
No questions, Your Honor. Mr. Benedict, Mr. Leonard, I believe this court has heard enough evidence. Mr. Benedict, I overruled the demurrer you originally filed without prejudice because I wanted a full airing of this municipal ordinance in order to show the people of this city that this statute is arbitrary, capricious, and therefore a denial of due process. You are right, Mr. Benedict. The ordinance is invalid, illegal, and unconstitutional, and you, Mr. Leonard, should see that it is taken out of our statute books. Furthermore, it is my personal opinion that we have seen here today how bigotry, narrow-mindedness, irrational prejudice, and uninformed impulsive motivations can bring irreparable harm not only to individuals, but to our country's basic principles of human rights. Seek filth, and you will find it. Seek beauty of narration, and you will find that too. But to find filth, you must search for it with a wanton mind. I'm going to dismiss all charges against the defendant, Claude Matthews. And further, I will recommend to the juvenile authorities that all charges against Barbara Eddy likewise be dismissed. This court stands adjourned.
Sam, thank you.
Thanks for everything, Mr. Matthews. Mr. Benedict. And you too, Mr. Tabor. I don't know what to say. I think I'm the happiest girl in the world.
Well, teacher?
I think teacher needs a drink.
Well, you've got $6.38. Hank, teacher is buying.